This is my 1.3 cardiovascular system assignment. The heart structure will fit the job it needs to do and therefore is used in everyday life and for professional athletes. The main functions of the heart are for the delivery of oxygen through the blood and the main delivery of nutrients and hormones. It does this through a network of tubes and arteries. The heart also involves the removal of carbon dioxide as a waste product of respiration, the removal of heat by transporting the heat through the blood, and the removal of lactic acid in anaerobic respiration. The cardiovascular system also transports heat via the arterioles by vasodilating or vasoconstricting. This is called thermoregulation. It is also used as protection as the blood produces white blood cells which helps us fight off infections and illnesses. Blood clotting is also an important process that prevents excessive bleeding when a blood vessel is injured. Platelets and proteins in your plasma work together to stop the bleeding by forming a clot over the injury. The cardiovascular system involves the use of two circulations, the pulmonary and the systemic. Systemic circulation is the movement of blood from the heart through the body to provide oxygen and nutrients and bringing deoxygenated blood back to the heart. The pulmonary circulation is the movement of blood from the heart to the lungs for oxygenation and then back to the heart again. In the pulmonary circulation, the deoxygenated blood from the body leaves the systemic circulation, where it enters the right atrium through the superior and inferior vena cava. The blood is then pumped through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, blood is pumped through the pulmonary valve and into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery splits into the left and the right pulmonary arteries and travel to each lung. At the lungs, the blood travels through the capillary beds on the alveoli where respiration occurs, removing carbon dioxide and adding oxygen to the blood. The oxygenated blood then leaves the lungs through the pulmonary veins, which returns it to the left atrium, completing the pulmonary circuit. Once entering the left heart, the blood flows through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, the blood is then pumped through the aortic valve into the aorta to travel through systemic circulation, delivering oxygenated blood to the body before returning again to the pulmonary circulation. The heart is crucial for the efficient distribution of blood for athletes and through everyday life and health. The way that it is structured helps this to be more efficient in its function. The heart consists of 4 chambers: right and left atria above the right and left ventricles. The aorta is the main artery that goes out of the body, supplying oxygenated blood to the circulatory system. The right atrium links the right ventricle by the tricuspid valve. This valve prevents backflow of the blood into the atrium above when the ventricle contracts. The left atrium links the left ventricle by the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. This also prevents backflow of the blood into the atrium above. The chordae tendineae attach each ventricle to its atrioventricular valve. Contractions of the ventricles have a tendency to force these valves up to the atria. Backflow of the blood would be dangerous, so the chordae tendineae hold each valve firmly to prevent this from occurring. Semilunar pocket valves are found in the blood vessels leaving the heart via the pulmonary artery and aorta. They only allow exit of blood from the heart through these vessels following ventricular contractions. Elastic recoil of these arteries and relaxation of the ventricles closes each semilunar valve. The ventricles have thicker muscular walls than the atria. When the atrium contracts, it only needs to propel blood a short distance into each ventricle. The left ventricle has a thicker muscular wall than the right ventricle because it needs to have a more powerful contraction because it's got to propel the blood to the systemic circulation to all of the body apart from the lungs. The right ventricle propels blood to the nearby lungs. The contraction does not need to be so powerful. The papillary muscles are located in the ventricles of the heart. They attach to the cusps of the atrioventricular valves via the chordae tendineae and contract to prevent inversion of the valves when ventricular contraction takes place. The pericardium is the membrane lining the pericardial cavity which surrounds the heart. The layers of the heart also have different jobs. The epicardium covers the outside of the heart. The myocardium is the cardiac muscle that's the thickest layer of the heart. The microscopic appearance of cardiac muscle shows branched fibers and intercalated discs. The endocardium lines the inside of the heart. Along with the myocardium branches in between. The cardiac cycle is the equivalent to one full heartbeat. It starts off as the atrial diastole, or the filling of the atria. The blood enters the left and right atria from the lungs and from the body via the pulmonary valve and the vena cava. The pressure of the blood builds up in the atria, which forces the AV valves open, and the blood then goes into the left and the right ventricle. 70% of this blood goes into the left and the right ventricle. Contraction happens through atrial systole. The atria contract to eject the remaining 30% from the atrial ventricles. This contraction forces the blood down. The aortic and the pulmonary valves are shut because the ventricles are full to stop backflow, and the ventricular systole causes the force of blood through the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. The conduction system is a group of specialized muscle cells that are in the wall of the heart. They send a series of electrical impulses or signals to the heart muscle, causing it to contract. So the impulse starts off at the SA node, which spreads to the left and the right atrium. This then causes a filling of the atrium, and this then causes the filling of the left and right atriums. The impulse then goes to the AV node, which then travels down the bundle of His and reaches the bundle branches. The impulse spreads up the Purkinje fibers around the ventricles, which causes the blood to be pumped up through the heart, through the semilunar valves, to the correct parts of the body and the lungs. The atria then fill with blood during atrial diastole, or the relaxation phase. The pressure builds up in the atria. The blood then passively travels into the ventricles during ventricular diastole, or the relaxation phase. The sinoatrial node, or the SA node, initiates or sends an impulse to the AV node, where the impulse spreads across the atria, causing atrial systole. This then causes the remaining blood in the atria to be pushed actively into the ventricles. The impulse reaches the AV node and continues down the bundle of His. The impulse is distributed to the Purkinje fibers, which causes ventricular systole. The bundle of His has a set rate of 20 to 40 beats per minute, whereas the AV node has a rate of 40 to 60 beats per minute, and the SA node works at a rate of 60 to 100 beats per minute. Therefore, the whole cycle lasts around 0.8 seconds. The autonomic nervous system is a division of the nervous system that is under voluntary control. It has two systems, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The autonomic nervous system can influence the cardiac cycle by an impulse travelling from the medulla oblongata down the accelerator nerve, where it triggers the release of norepinephrine, where it will stimulate the SA node to fire more frequently, therefore increasing the heart rate. When the emotional or physical stress goes away, the heart then goes back to normal resting heart rate. This is where the parasympathetic nervous system takes over. It starts off as an impulse travelling through the vagus nerve, where it triggers the release of ACH, and then reaches the SA node. Therefore, it inhibits and slows down the heart rate. On the other hand, the cardiac cycle can be influenced by hormones. This is when an impulse would be sent down the sympathetic nerve to the adrenal glands and would trigger the release of adrenaline, therefore increasing the heart rate at the SA node. The blood's role has four main functions of transporting the nutrients and supplying the oxygen to the muscles and the organs. The blood is made up of four components. These four are the red blood cells, the white blood cells, platelets, and plasma. The blood contains 55% of plasma and about 90% of this plasma is made up of water. Therefore, if you are dehydrated, there is less water in the plasma. This could be a problem because it then increases the viscosity of the blood, making it harder for it to flow through the veins and the arteries. 8% of the plasma is protein, such as antibodies and clotting factors, including fibrogen, and 2% of the plasma is hormones, such as insulin, and the remaining 45% of the blood is formed elements. These will include the white blood cells, the red blood cells, and the platelets. The red blood cells have no nucleus to make more room for hemoglobin. Therefore, they have 97% of their total composition is hemoglobin, which carries the oxygen molecules. The hemoglobin is located in the cytoplasm and carries 4 pairs of oxygens in each red blood cell. They have a circular biconcave shape, so have a larger surface area to allow for gaseous exchange. White blood cells are used they use the bloodstream as a means of transportation to the infection area. They are larger than red blood cells because they contain no hemoglobin and they need to be able to engulf the phagocytes or the germs. Similarly, they are able to produce antibodies to destroy the germs first before engulfing them. Platelets are the smallest and they have no colour or nucleus. They form a scab to prevent blood loss and stop germs and bacteria entering the infected area. The platelets release the enzyme when they contact air or fatty deposits. This is where this causes the scab to form. The platelets can clot the blood by an activated platelet and fibrin wrapping the red blood cells into a bundle in the broken vessel. And as you can see on the screen, that it blocks the gap between the broken vessel wall and the bundle of red blood cells. The blood vessels are found throughout the body, and there are 5 main types of blood vessels: arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. They transport blood around the body to the organs and the muscles. It can also affect the blood pressure of the veins. As you can see on the chart on the screen, they all have different types of tissues in the vessels. So, for example, the elastic artery has a high proportion of smooth muscle tissue and elastic muscle tissue, and it's got a small lumen because it hasn't got to get so much blood through. Whereas the vein has got a larger lumen because it's got to be able to get the blood through. It's got to be able to aid the return of blood to the heart by preventing the blood flow from flowing in the opposite direction. So it's got to have, the larger ones have got to have valves in it too. The artery wall has a thick muscular elastic layer to expand as the blood surges through and to be able to recoil after. They are controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. So the blood is under higher blood pressure and high velocity as it has been ejected from the heart. It carries the blood away from the heart. So arteries are away from the heart. Arterioles are tiny branches of arteries that lead to capillaries. They are controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, so they can vasoconstrict to minimize blood flow and vasodilate to open the flow. It is important in controlling the distribution of blood, therefore they can transport the blood from the arteries to the capillaries. They are the main regulators of blood flow and pressure. They do this by dilating to reduce blood flow and pressure, and constrict to increase blood pressure. The capillaries are only 1 blood cell thick to make diffusion quicker. This is helped by having large networks of capillaries. They supply gases and nutrients and remove the waste, and they diffuse the oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, and salts between the blood and the organs. The blood pressure and the blood flow are much lower in the capillaries as they have a much larger area. The venules are small vessels that are larger than capillaries, but that are smaller than veins. They drain blood from the capillaries into the veins to be able to return to the heart. And the larger veins have valves to stop the backflow, therefore they aid venous return. They also transport blood towards the heart. This is allowed by them having a large lumen, therefore the pressure is very low. They include valves in